We'll begin with the 4/4 chant, which is on page 28 of your chant book, I think. It's also posted in the chat for folks at home. Page 30. Thanks. Somehow I can't etch that in my mind. Page 30. Page 30, page 30, page 30. Maybe I'll remember next week. Now let us make the 4 boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with compassion. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without. I will abide, 1/4, with a mind imbued with gladness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with equanimity. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and and to all else, to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Allowing the energies of body and mind to settle on their own. Tuning into the way it is to have a body. Inviting kind and loving attention with this experience of body. And also this experience of mind. The sensitive heart that feels into the way it is. Remembering there's no need to reject any experience. When we accept life on life's terms, we accept all the sensory experience that comes into awareness. Sounds are being known. Body sensations. Thoughts, emotions. Everything is just something being known. An aspect of body or an aspect of mind. Experience that's here and now in the present moment. There's no need to reject or control this moment. No need to try to make it be anything other than the way it is. Because we understand this arising is just nature. And we learn about the experience of freedom when we just allow nature to be nature, allow experience to be experience. In this way, practice is very simple. It's about receiving whatever is predominant without reactivity, without rejecting or manipulating. Trusting the movement of experience. Everything is always moving. Nothing is fixed. This idea moving, the sensation moving, the sound moving. Don't need to try to pin anything down, to hold on to it, to study it. Simply relax, allowing life to come and go, to move. This relaxation is key to letting go. Nothing's personal. The inevitable impact of continuity of awareness is wisdom. When we remember to relax and to receive with sincerity experience arising and passing away in our moment to moment awareness, this heart will begin to let go, begin to understand more deeply about the nature of all experience and what it's like to be a human being. Let's continue in silence now. A minute to stretch your legs if you'd like. Good to see everyone this morning. Good to be back. Got to start somewhere. It's always the trickier thing to know where to start with these Dharma talks. Can you hear me okay? I'll start there. You hear me okay in the back? Or up a little bit higher? Okay. Back there too? Okay. A little higher. Yeah. And Zoomers, you okay? All right. That any better? A little bit? Oh, great. Okay. I'll start with this little statement from Sharon Salzberg, who is a wonderful Dharma teacher, author, uh, co-founder of Insight Meditation Society. There was a podcast interview with Krista Tippett on being. Some of you may know that. She said, the healing is in the return, not in not getting lost in the beginning, talking about meditation. The healing is in the return, not in not getting lost in the beginning. When I started meditation, like most of us, I had a different idea of success and what it would look like, and that it would be very much about accumulation. Like if I could be with 2 breaths in the beginning without my mind wandering, then surely by today I should be with 8. And then tomorrow I should be with 15. And then eventually my mind won't wander. And I found that the most unbelievable thing, that wasn't the point, that learning how to let go more gracefully was the point. Learning how to start over with some compassion for ourselves instead of judging ourselves so harshly, that was the point. And it's so funny because really it was like lesson 101 for me. And it's probably the most precious thing. I use it every day. It's still the most significant thing I've ever learned from meditation, and that I use every single day because we do. We have to start over and do a course correction or pick ourselves up if we've fallen down every day. The healing is in the return, not in not getting lost in the beginning. Beautiful words. And is anybody suspicious? I mean, this is how retraining habits or training in new habits, training in more skillful habits goes. You know, we tend to have an idea of where we want to go, and anything that doesn't feel like that goal tends to be a problem, right? And yet the power of meditation is really in being a learner or in the learning itself rather than getting anywhere that we want to go. And that's how we learn to make life our teacher and how to appreciate experience or allow experience to be what it is. right, is because for the sake of learning. Because it's not in getting somewhere, the Buddha liberation or freedom, or it's about relate differently to the way things are right now, right? The actual way things are right now, not the way we want them to be, not even if we can manipulate them to be how we want them to be. It's actually in learning how to relate to the what feels like confusing, complicated territory of just being a human being. And this is another, from Ajahn Sundara, who's a Bhikkhuni, from her book, Seeds of Dhamma. She says, when we first come to the practice, we don't quite know how to let go because we may not clearly see our particular sets of habits. We are dealing with the mind that is programmed in certain ways. And no matter how much we want it to be different, it finds ways not to let go. We can find ourselves stuck. In fact, we may find that spiritual teaching makes us feel even worse because in our determination for practice, everything intensifies a bit, even the desire to let go. You ever know that one? Huh? Yeah. Letting go takes place when we stop entangling ourselves. So first of all, we have to let things be as they are. Then we have to accept everything as it is. We don't get involved with the things we want to let go of, just let them be. Nature is impermanent, so if we let them be and don't touch them, they just go naturally. We needn't be frightened about not knowing how to let go. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, of not getting it right. That is an early understanding on the path of awakening, accepting that the mind does not know how to do it straight away. We may be willing of doing things. We just don't know yet. So one aspect of letting go is being with all the things we witness in our hearts and minds without getting involved with them. It's more of the same, right? And so this wonderful teaching, I just can't get enough of just the simple instruction to relax. Yeah, relax with things as they are. Because in the instruction to relax, we really, wisdom arises and shows up for us. The only real reason we can do that is because this is just nature. And these teachings are so practical like this. All of the teachings aimed at helping us not suffer. And why do we suffer? Because we try to control everything. Yeah. Controlling and appropriating what belongs to nature. So when we relax that sense of control, that sense of trying to get somewhere, of making things be how we want it to be. And we return experience to nature. Because it is just nature. It's just the nature of causes and conditions to arise, for experience to arise when it's time. Not our time, but the time of the movement. Yeah. And most of the time we don't see our habits. We don't notice this kind of underlying tendency to want to control, manipulate, trying to get what we want and get away from what we don't want. We don't see this happening beneath the surface. And then we come to spiritual practice, and those same habits are playing out in our sitting practice, and our walking practice, and our relating, right? And just as Ajahn Sundara said, we don't get involved with the things we want to let go of, just let them be. And it's in this relaxing and letting it be, letting thoughts be, letting our emotions be, right? Letting this drama just be. It's like we don't have to do anything extra to set it down. That letting go happens on its own because the wise heart does that. The wise heart lets it be. Because there's an understanding that this experience is just born of causes and conditions, right? It's not actually self-made. Like and once we feel into, as awareness gets stronger and we begin to feel more deeply into the habits of the mind and start to see how things play out, right? We wouldn't do the things the mind does, would we? We wouldn't purposefully suffer. Right? Once we start to feel into the power of like, oh, this is stressful. It's just kind of watching that, the mind that gets caught up in its ruminating thoughts, and just the thinking itself, just that, even if it in the last sit, just a little bit of thinking and then recognize that's what's happening and relaxing around it, that feels better. And then goes back to doing that again. And then, letting it go, that feels better. But just that kind of incessant returning to a ruminating thought is stressful, right? And I feel the stress, or we can feel the stress on our bodies, the tension in the forehead, even in very, very simple, ordinary ways, like the constriction, just a little bit of tightening in the shoulders, and then remembering like, oh yeah, shoulders are tight, not hating the shoulders for being tight, but just relaxing around it, not hating the forehead for being tense, but just breathing through it, accepting and letting things be, right? Just like this. And this suffering, that we don't cause, we're not purposefully motivating suffering. We wouldn't do that. Once we start to feel the tension or the stress, or however we might define suffering for ourselves, once we start to feel that, we know, oh yeah, I'm not making this happen. It can feel even more stressful because we personalize it, like we are doing something wrong, right? But it's just habit that's arising that way. And the unrecognized habits again and again and again that push themselves forward. Yeah. And the suffering that's there, this stress, is because of misunderstandings that run really deep in our systems. And that pushing against, that trying to manipulate or negotiate or control, that's just another one of those habits. Yeah. A habit of ignorance that's been seeded from long ago. Forgetting that everything is always moving. Yeah. And like, that moment when notice that unskillful habit of mind and you go, oh, it's always like this. Why is it always like this for me? Right. And we forget, well, it's not always like this. And it's actually just nature. It's not actually mine anyway, right? Why appropriate something that belongs to nature? So just in a moment like that, it's not actually ours. So we suffer because of these long habits of ignorance, these habits of ignorance that like things to be the way we want them to be, or like things to want to pretend that they're stagnant, not moving when everything is moving. And these habits, these misunderstanding, these habits of ignorance that claim experience as our own when it really belongs to nature. Right? So movements of the wholesome are like this, habits, right? And movements of the unwholesome, of ignorance, are like this too. So every moment of our lives is a movement of ignorance, a movement of wisdom, a movement of something, right? Just habits from long ago that keep moving forward. And the more we practice, the more we begin to recognize these moments of stress, right? And we relax around them. And that softens that in a moment when we feel the tension, right? It actually undermines that habit of ignorance from returning again. It might not make it go away. That's not again, a habit of control to want it to go away, but just the softening and trusting moment to moment awareness to support that lessening of that unskillful habit. And these movements that I was talking about, just movements of wisdom or movements of ignorance, right? It's what shapes our minds. It's what shapes our lives. It's what shapes the world. So what do we do? Well, the Buddhist teachings and the instructions are always so simple. Yeah, it can feel complicated, like we have to learn a lot of stuff, but The instructions are always quite simple. Simply meet each moment, be honest, be real about what's actually arising, and meet each moment without reactivity, right? And when there's reactivity, we meet that moment without reactivity, right? Because there will be reactivity. I know this for sure. Carol Wilson calls this moment-to-moment awareness the liberating simplicity of mindfulness. The liberating simplicity of mindfulness. Simple. It's just this, sweetie, right? Right now, right in this very moment. It may feel like the world and my mind and my life and all of it, it's so complicated, right? But in this moment, the practice retrains us to be in life in very simple ways. And that's how we learn to experience freedom, right? By just accepting the way things are. It's harder to accept things when they're in idea form, right? Because the mind finds lots of critiques. Well, I can't accept that because of this, because of that. But these are just thoughts, right? So the liberating simplicity of mindfulness to recognize, oh, the mind is just thinking. How does that feel, right? It feels like this to be thinking. How do I know? Oh, it feels like this in the forehead, feels like this in the body. It just feels like this, right? Oh, I don't like this. Well, that's another experience to be known, right? I don't like this. Oh, what is that like to not like this? Just goes like that. So it isn't that mindfulness, the liberating simplicity of mindfulness, it isn't that mindfulness takes us into another more preferred world. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not how it goes. In fact, when the Buddha awakened, he awakened into the world that was just a mess the day before, right? Confused, all the habits, all the experiences that make a world were there. But what was different was understanding. The way the mind understands experience, that's what's different. So it's not in these moments where we go, oh yeah, it's like this, I don't like that. How can understanding the way it is support the experience of freedom in the here and now? Right? Is it that I could only be happy if my mind would stop doing this? That's just another thought. It's just another idea, it's just another view, right? But how about in this moment? What's the experience of freedom with this in this moment? This mind that's thinking, or the mind that doesn't like the sound, right? It can be, simple. Like when we actually are practicing simply, it can be anything that drives us a little nuts. I was practicing at Common Grounds Retreat Center many years ago now by myself before it was actually a retreat center, and sitting in what used to be the living room there with a big noisy refrigerator that's no longer there. But the sound, it was like I'm out there in this, I can sort of like shape my retreat the way I want it and no demands. It just is like such a nice, at least a nice idea. And then the refrigerator, it was the hum of the the hum of the refrigerator. It took a while to actually notice that it was the hum of the refrigerator because I was so busy trying to be a good practitioner in these pristine conditions that when I finally noticed the hum of the refrigerator, and it wasn't just sound, it was like sound and not liking the sound, right? And then wanting to get away from the sound, and all these proliferating thoughts about how the sound of the refrigerator is ruining my precious retreat, right? Which is so silly, right? But the simplicity of experience and the mind's ignorance in its relationship to experience, that's everything, right? It's if we want to know how to be free, it's in working with these simple moments of our lives in useful ways, right? And so what did this require? A lot of adaptation, right? Stay there with the refrigerator, see if it's possible to just notice, to be with the aversion to the sound. Okay, that felt hard. In fact, it felt like aversion was just building. Just recognize sound as being known. Well, it quickly led to aversion. So, there's just kind of, and so deciding to get up, move away from the sound, to remind this heart that it was okay, that this was manageable, that this was workable, and move back into the sound, move into the sound a little bit far away and watch the mind that was like straining to hear it, you know? But all these like moves, it's so interesting, the train of the mind and how the process of suffering is created in these moments, right? But to think about suffering, you know, and what it is and how to be free, it's a very different experience, right? In the mind-made world of thoughts. But practice isn't about that. Practice is about living life in these ways that feel very simple, so that we taste that experience of, well, we taste the experience of freedom because we taste the experience of stress, right? And then the mind learns to understand things differently. And there's a take-home message, right? Like even all these years later, reflecting on like there was such deep learning there, just being with the sound. And actually it was quite humbling. And so there's a taste of that that remains too. Like, oh, don't get too full of yourself, like as a student on this path, right? Because the sound might make you want to leave a retreat. The sound of a refrigerator might make you want to leave a retreat, right? So like the mind, it doesn't need a lot to actually whip up its for those habits of ignorance to unfold in the ways that they will. Which just means that the real antidote is always continuity of awareness, moment to moment awareness, and being willing to adjust so that we keep trusting that moment to moment awareness as our deepest guide and teacher. Because it's through our moment to moment awareness that we start to learn something different about experience and about life. Our relationship begins to change because we've learned something moment by moment, right? Habits really do start to shift on their own, right? Because of that relaxation around it. Like, oh yeah, this is just nature. Nature is like this. This habit to get really worked up over something, right? It's like this. And without awareness, without a willingness to adjust, to pause, to take care of myself, to remember that I don't actually want to seed these unskillful habits. I don't want to support them. I don't want to encourage their growth. Actually, what I want to do is to apply a skillful habit, even if it's fragile, the habit of adjusting, of care, of learning how to take care of this heart and mind right now. Yeah. That's a much more better use of my time than trying to imagine how to get rid of this external stressor. Right? So the habits that begin to shift on their own they only shift because of that consistent willingness to put ourselves in positions to be learners. Not all at once, not a learner that gets something and then just rides it out, right? A learner that's willing to keep trusting mindfulness, moment by moment, and to see it again and again and again, so that the strength of the skillful eventually gets stronger than the strength of the unskillful, right? Those habits towards ignorance, eventually weaken with time. Yeah. And the strength of awareness as a skillful habit, kindness as a skillful habit, willingness to keep adjusting as a skillful habit becomes stronger. Yeah, life becomes more workable. There are fewer of these moments when it feels like, oh, I can practice here, but not there, right? I can practice when I go to common ground and sit on the cushion for 30 minutes, but the rest of my life feels too hard, right? There are fewer of those moments because the mind and our hearts, our whole being starts to develop some confidence that experience is workable. Not because we imagine it's workable in the thought mind, in the thought world, right? Because we see, oh, it's workable right here and now. This experience of being human is like this, and I'm willing to adjust, willing to keep trusting the movement of the wholesome, right? Willing to understand that the movement of the unwholesome has an impact on our lives and in the world for sure, right? Oh, and I don't want to keep feeding that. So I'll keep returning to a habit of mindfulness, yeah, to support a deepening of wisdom and skillful habits of mind. John Sundara again. We may be willing, but we are working with unrecognized habits, unrecognized ways of doing things. We just don't know yet. Yeah. We don't even see the habits that are guiding our lives. It takes a lot of continuity of awareness to even be able to see the habits that are guiding our lives, right? So one aspect of letting go is being with all the things we witness in our minds without getting involved in them, just seeing them over and over and over, because it's that continuity of awareness that inevitably leads to deeper ways of knowing. Sayadaw U Tejaniya, he says something like, Vipassana meditation is experiencing the mind and body directly from moment to moment with wise understanding. Right? So what meditation is all about is experiencing this mind and body directly from moment to moment with wise understanding. And this is what he also calls the 3 jobs of a yogi, of a student, right? The 3 jobs of a student or a yogi is to experience this mind and body directly from moment to moment with continuity of awareness, with wise understanding, understanding the flow, the momentum of habit energy, the movement of ignorance, the movement of unskillfulness, the movement of wisdom, the movement of skillfulness. So 3 things: experiencing the mind and body directly, right? In very simple ways, understanding that what a human being, how any of us can experience our lives is always through the 5 senses and through the activity of mind, right? So that's it. What we feel, what we make more complex in the thought world is actually just the input from our 5 senses, what we hear, see, taste, touch, feel, see. I get them all 5. And then how the mind makes meaning out of it, right? With thinking and emoting. So in a moment, life is more simple than we imagine it to be, right? It's just this. It's this experience of body and the experience of mind, the perceiving mind, the feeling mind, right? The meaning-making mind. It's just that, right? So sometimes we can step out of the train of making meaning to see the mind that's actually just making meaning, right? And that itself is liberating. Like, oh yeah, the mind is just looking for a way to make sense of this and make sense of it in a way that makes me feel grounded, and grounded in a way that so that it doesn't have to feel that vulnerable, right? Yeah. So experiencing the mind and body directly, the liberating simplicity of mindfulness through the 5 senses and the activity of mind. Sound is just sound, right? It wasn't that there was something inherently problematic about the retreat, or I was being betrayed by the environment or something because of the hum of the refrigerator, right? It was actually just sound that the mind was making meaning of, right? And it was becoming a problem for me, right? The sound, but it actually was just the refrigerator doing natural things. Yeah. The motor running to keep the refrigerator, alive or doing its activity. So learning how to just trust that, like, oh yeah, the mind, this is what's happening here, friend. Like there's sound that's unpleasant. There's a not liking that sound, right? First there's contact, there's a noticing, there's a connection with the sound. The mind is receiving sound, right? Making contact with it. Yeah. And it's not just sound. Now the mind is quickly go, I don't like this, right? Now there's a whole storyline that's developing about me in relationship to the sound, which is usually the case. It's usually the storyline that centers me, right? And who I am and in relationship to everything. And now there's a problem for me, right? When actually it's just sound and the mind receiving sound and making meaning of it. And then this moment to moment, right? It's not, there were moments when the fan or whatever on the refrigerator would turn off, so it was intermittent. And when it turned off, there was like an obvious like this, what a relief. Like the mind, there wasn't sound. And sometimes what I would notice is that like there would be a steadiness of awareness, noticing experience as it was. And then that because there was interest in other experiences, when the sound of the hum of the refrigerator would kick back on, I wouldn't notice it until at some point I would notice it. And then it would immediately be like, oh, right? Like, because that habit had been established to not like the sound, right? But it's just this continuity of awareness moment by moment. And sometimes that experience, the unskillfulness of mind is actually not there. We don't even recognize it, right? Thich Nhat Hanh would sometimes say, like, notice non-toothaches, right? We want to be able to notice for balance, both when the pain is there and when it's not there, right? And then we can start to see interesting things like, well, the mind is really searching for something to be salty about right now. Well, that's just me. So experiencing the mind indirectly with from moment to moment, with continuity of awareness, not forgetting that this moment matters, right? That it's relevant, that understanding develops because of continuity of awareness, right? Not because we want to control, but through continuity of awareness, just the habit. Understanding is there, arises because it's a naturally occurring experience with continuity of awareness. It, you know, wise understanding, wisdom, wise view will naturally, it's a natural result of continuity of awareness, right? Inevitable natural result. It's inevitable, right? So what we need to do is to trust awareness in the moment to moment noticing, yeah, because it's powerful, right? Even if it feels like it's irrelevant, just notice like, oh, this is another moment to be aware. Feeling like this moment is irrelevant. What does that feel like? Right? It's what's the mind body experience of this feeling like this is irrelevant right now. And then with wise understanding, like receiving this experience as nature, right? Even when there's a misunderstanding, it's so powerful to go, oh, yeah, this is just ignorance right now, right? Forgetting that this moment matters, like having this view that this moment is irrelevant is just unskillful habit of mind. But now that I'm seeing that as an unskillful habit of mind, it's possible to just view this unskillful habit of mind as an experience of nature, right? Again, not something that we need to appropriate. So it doesn't really matter what's arising because there's always this possibility of meeting experience in the present moment with the heart that can be aware, receive, and understand experience as nature. The world gets so much bigger like this, right? When we don't have to be people that are in control and manipulating everything to get things to be exactly the way we want them to be, right? The world gets bigger because it just becomes a giant, our minds, our hearts, our relationships, the ways in which we engage just because become this giant sort of playground of creativity and exploration. Like, what are the processes that are expressing themselves right now? What are the unskillful habits that are and where's the skillful habits of mind? What's the possibility of that? Mingyu Rinpoche says, if we want to be happy, we must recognize what causes and conditions lead to well-being in our experience. Similarly, if we don't have a clear understanding of the conditions that create suffering, how can we possibly expect to free ourselves from it, right? We're just being really willing to learn. I remember I was an athlete in high school and college, and I played volleyball a long time. And I remember like learning, with whenever we're learning something new, there's like and you take the next step, there's like an unlearning of old habits, right? And that's like, feels like how meditation goes. Like we know something, and then usually there's like an unlearning of old habits. We don't even see that our habits have been unskillful until we start to see that. And it feels kind of uncomfortable, right? Like it doesn't feels like, well, this isn't natural to be aware like this, right? But I was remembering like learning this defensive drill at one point when I was playing sports. And the mind was just so invested in the learning of it that even though it didn't feel natural, there was just a lot of interest. Like, can the body move this way? You know, and then there was a lot of mistakes. So it was like, well, the clumsy, falling down or whatever, not getting it right, missing the point, and falling back into old habits because it felt more natural to do it a different way. And then just like continuously learning. But I remember that I just that one 30-minute session or whatever as a moment that it really felt like freedom. Yeah. That the mind was just content to learn. And learning was happening, even if there was like a falling down and getting back up, like Sharon was saying. So it's not just this smooth ride, right? It's just like remembering that we're here to learn something. And the learning is always more important than the whatever it is, the attainment of anything. Because it's so good, I'll end with just reading this little passage from Sharon again. Maybe as like a take home message for all of us. The healing is in the return, not in not getting lost in the beginning. When I started meditation, like most of us, I had a different idea of success and what it would look like and what it would be very much about. And that was accumulation. Like if I could be with 2 breaths in the beginning without my mind wandering, then surely by today I would be with 8. And then tomorrow I should be with 15. And then eventually my mind won't wander. And I found that the most unbelievable thing, that wasn't the point, that learning how to let go more gracefully was the point. Learning how to start over with some compassion for ourselves instead of judging ourselves so harshly, that was the point. And it's so funny because really, it was like lesson 101 for me. And it's probably the most precious thing. I use it every day. It's still the most significant thing I've ever learned from meditation, and that I use every single day because we do. We have to start over and do a course correction or pick ourselves up if we've fallen down every single day. Let's take a moment to sit together and let go of the words. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being together this morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to have a community to practice with. Yeah, really grateful for each and every one of you and wish you well. And hopefully we'll see you again on the Dharma path.